March 2nd, 1960, 3:17 a.m., Bad Nauheim, Germany. Elvis Presley stood alone on a deserted street corner, his military duffel bag at his feet, staring at the house where the love of his life lay sleeping. In 6 hours, he would board a transport back to America, leaving behind 2 years of Army service and Priscilla Beaulieu. The most famous man in the world was about to make the most devastating decision of his life. What happened in those final hours would haunt him forever and inspire the most desperate song he would ever record. This is the true story of the night Elvis faced his ultimate now or never moment. The clock on the wall of Elvis's modest army quarters seemed to mock him with every passing second. March 1st, 1960, 11:47 p.m., less than 8 hours remained before his transport to America, and Elvis Aaron Presley had never felt more tormented in his entire life. For 21 months, he had lived a double existence. By day, he was just another soldier fulfilling his duty. By night, he was desperately, hopelessly, completely in love with a girl who would turn 15 in 2 months, Priscilla. Even thinking her name sent electric shocks through his entire being. She had become his obsession, his salvation, and now his ultimate torture. How could he leave her? How could he not? The impossibility of their situation had been eating away at him for months. But now, faced with the brutal reality of separation, Elvis felt like he was dying from the inside out. He had spent the evening with her and her family, trying to act normal, trying to pretend that his heart wasn't shattering into a million pieces. Captain Beaulieu had been cordial but distant, clearly relieved that this dangerous liaison between his young stepdaughter and the world's most controversial entertainer was finally coming to an end. Mrs. Beaulieu had been kinder, perhaps sensing the genuine anguish in Elvis's eyes, but she too seemed resigned to what everyone saw as inevitable. But it was Priscilla's reaction that nearly destroyed him. She had been brave all evening, smiling and making conversation, but Elvis could see the devastation she was trying so hard to hide. When he walked her to her door, for what might be the last time, she had finally broken down. "Don't leave me, Elvis," she had whispered, her tears soaking through his uniform shirt. "Please don't leave me." Now, alone in his quarters, Elvis paced like a caged animal. Every rational thought told him that leaving was the right choice, the only choice. She was too young. The scandal would destroy both their lives, and Colonel Parker would have him committed to an asylum if he even suggested bringing her back to America. But his heart, his soul, every fiber of his being screamed that walking away from Priscilla would be the biggest mistake of his life. He picked up his guitar and began to strum, trying to find some melody that could express the agony tearing him apart. The words came unbidden. "It's now or never. Come hold me tight." The irony wasn't lost on him. He was living the most crucial now or never moment of his life, and he was paralyzed by the weight of the choice before him. At 2:30 a.m., unable to bear the suffocating walls of his quarters any longer, Elvis grabbed his jacket and stepped out into the cold German night. The streets of Bad Nauheim were completely deserted, the only sound his footsteps echoing off the cobblestones as he walked aimlessly through the town that had become the stage for the greatest love story of his life. Every corner held a memory. There was the cafe where he had first taken Priscilla for coffee, watching in fascination as she tried to act more sophisticated than her years allowed. There was the park where they had walked hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing, both pretending that their time together could last forever. There was the music shop where he had bought her a small jewelry box that played "Love Me Tender," a gift that had made her cry with happiness. As he walked, Elvis found himself reliving every moment of their courtship. The first time she had laughed at one of his jokes, a sound so pure and genuine that it had stopped his heart. The first time he had kissed her, a gentle, tentative touch of lips that had felt like the most sacred moment of his life. The way she looked at him, not as Elvis Presley the celebrity, but as Elvis the man, the vulnerable young soldier who was just as lost and scared as she was. But it was the recent conversations that tortured him most. Priscilla had begun talking about the future, about what would happen when he returned to America. In her innocent, optimistic way, she believed that love could conquer anything, that somehow they would find a way to be together despite all the obstacles. Her faith in their love only made his impending betrayal more agonizing. Elvis found himself standing outside her house, looking up at the dark window of her bedroom. Was she sleeping? Was she lying awake, crying into her pillow as he wanted to cry into his? The distance between them, maybe 50 feet, felt like an impossible chasm. He wanted to throw pebbles at her window like some lovesick teenager, to climb up and take her away with him. Consequences be damned. Instead, he stood there like a statue, paralyzed by indecision and drowning in regret for a choice he hadn't even made yet. The cold bit through his jacket, but he barely felt it. All he could feel was the pain of knowing that, in a few hours, he would walk away from the only woman he had ever truly loved, and there was nothing, absolutely nothing he could do about it. The streetlight cast long shadows, and Elvis realized that he was crying. The king of rock and roll, the man who had conquered the world, stood weeping on a German street corner at 3 in the morning, defeated by a love that was both the most beautiful and most impossible thing that had ever happened to him. July 5th, 1960, RCA Studio B, Nashville. 4 months had passed since Elvis left Germany. 4 months of pure torture disguised as triumphant homecoming. The world celebrated his return. Ed Sullivan wanted him back on the show. Hollywood was offering movie deals. And Colonel Parker was orchestrating what he called the greatest comeback in entertainment history. But Elvis felt like he was dying inside, that the letters from Priscilla came almost daily, each one a dagger to his heart. She wrote about school, her friends, mundane details of her life in Germany. But between every line was the unspoken question. When are you coming back for me? When are you going to keep the promise you made in those final desperate moments before you left? Elvis had promised her that this separation was temporary, that he would find a way to bring her to America. But as the weeks passed, the impossibility of that promise became clearer and clearer. Now, standing in the Nashville studio with the sheet music for It's Now or Never in his hands, Elvis felt the cosmic joke of his situation. The song, based on the Italian classic O Sole Mio, was supposed to be his big crossover hit, the recording that would establish his credibility as a serious vocalist. Instead, it had become his personal anthem of regret and missed opportunity. As the musicians began the opening notes, Elvis closed his eyes and was instantly transported back to that street corner in Bad Nauheim. Every word of the song felt like it was written specifically for that moment. It's now or never. Come hold me tight. Kiss me, my darling. Be mine tonight. These weren't just lyrics. They were the desperate thoughts that had consumed him during those final hours in Germany. The first take was technically perfect, but emotionally hollow. Elvis knew he was holding back, protecting himself from the full weight of the song's meaning. But as they prepared for the second take, something broke open inside him. He thought about Priscilla, probably sitting in her room in Germany, waiting for a letter that would never come, hoping for a phone call that he was too cowardly to make. When Elvis opened his mouth to sing the second time, it wasn't just a performance, it was a confession, a prayer, a scream of anguish that had been building for 4 months. His voice soared with the desperation of a man who had chosen safety over love, career over heart. Every note was saturated with the knowledge that he had faced his now or never moment and chosen never. The musicians in the studio knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't the confident Elvis they knew. This was a man pouring his soul out through song, using music to say everything he couldn't say in real life. When the song ended, there was absolute silence in the studio. Even the hardened Nashville session players had tears in their eyes. "That's it," Elvis said quietly, his voice hoarse with emotion. "That's the one." He didn't need to hear it back. He knew he had just recorded the most honest 3.5 minutes of his life, a musical time machine that would forever transport him back to the night he lost Priscilla Beaulieu. September 1962. Elvis sat in the living room of Graceland, holding a letter from Priscilla that had arrived that morning. She was 17 now, finishing her final year of school in Germany, and her letters had taken on a different tone, more mature, but also more distant. She was growing up without him, becoming a young woman he didn't know, and the realization filled him with a panic that made his chest feel like it was caving in. It's Now or Never had been released 2 years earlier and had become one of his biggest hits, reaching #1 and selling over 5 million copies. The irony was unbearable. The song that represented his greatest failure as a man had become one of his greatest successes as an artist. Every time he heard it on the radio, every time he was forced to perform it in concerts, he was reminded of the night he had chosen cowardice over courage. But something had shifted in Elvis during those 2 years of separation. The success of his comeback felt hollow without someone to share it with. The endless parade of starlets and one-night stands left him feeling more alone than ever. He had conquered the world again, but he had lost his soul in Germany, and no amount of fame or fortune could fill that void. The letter in his hands contained news that hit him like a physical blow. Priscilla wrote that she had been dating a boy from her school, who had asked her to the prom. She was careful to present it as nothing serious, just normal teenage socializing, but Elvis could read between the lines. She was moving on. The girl who had waited for him faithfully for 2 years was finally accepting that her American soldier wasn't coming back for her. That night, Elvis made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He called Colonel Parker and announced his intention to bring Priscilla to America to finish her education. Parker was apoplectic, threatening to quit, warning of career suicide and public scandal. But for the first time in 2 years, Elvis felt something like hope stirring in his chest. The negotiations with Priscilla's parents were delicate and complex. It took months of careful diplomacy, promises, and reassurances, but eventually an agreement was reached. Priscilla would come to America to attend Catholic school in Memphis, officially living with Elvis's father and stepmother, but actually residing at Graceland. When Elvis called Priscilla with the news, the silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like eternity. Finally, her voice, small and uncertain, asked, "Are you sure this time, Elvis? Are you sure you won't leave me again?" The question shattered his heart, because he knew he deserved her doubt. He had already left her once, and that betrayal would always stand between them. Unsure, he whispered into the phone, and for the first time since that night in Bad Nauheim, he meant it. He had finally learned the lesson that "It's Now or Never" had been trying to teach him, that love demanded courage, that some chances only come once, and that the greatest risk was not taking any risk at all. He had chosen never once before. This time he was choosing now. "It's Now or Never" became more than Elvis's crossover hit. It became the soundtrack to the most crucial decision of his life. The song reminds us that love often demands impossible choices, and that sometimes our greatest regrets come not from the risks we took, but from the ones we didn't take. Elvis's story proves that it's never too late to choose now over never, even when fear tries to paralyze our hearts. What now or never moments have shaped your life? Share this story and tell us about the choices that changed everything. Subscribe for more untold stories of love, loss, and the courage to follow your heart.